I was still wearing the black dress from the funeral when Mr. Winters slid the small wooden box across his desk. Folks in Jackson know that office. Paneling the color of pecan shells, tall windows that let in all the Mississippi sun and none of the warmth you think should come with it. Inside the box sat a brass key on a leather fob, and an envelope with my name written in Joshua's tight, careful hand. My husband had been gone 5 days. The air still smelled like lilies and starch. I swear I could feel him standing behind me, telling me to breathe slow like he always did when the world tried to run me over. If you're hearing my story, please subscribe so more voices like mine can be heard. Mrs. Carter, Mr. Winters said, clearing his throat. Joshua left instructions I was only to share after his passing. He pushed a stack of documents toward me. A deed. Taxes prepaid. Insurance. The key you're holding is to the main gate. Gate. I turned the brass over in my palm, cold as a coin from the bottom of a fountain. To what? He glanced down. Sweetwater Ridge. A ranch up in East Texas, Pine County. Your husband repurchased his family property 3 years ago, quietly. He asked that you hear about it only when. When he was gone, I finished for him. The envelope in my lap felt heavier than it should, like paper soaked in river water. Joshua never told me about buying anything, much less a ranch. Land up there's turned complicated, Mr. Winters went on. The last 18 months there've been surveyors. New pipelines proposed. Rumors. His eyes slid to mine. Oil. I almost laughed. Oil? We teach school, Mr. Winters. We clip coupons and keep 2 cars because mine is older than our granddaughter. Your husband declined several offers. He nudged the stack again. He wrote you a letter. I waited until I was alone in the hall to open it. Joshua's handwriting brought back 28 years of grocery lists and notes on the fridge. Out of milk. Pick up KJ at choir. You looked beautiful this morning. My breath caught on the first line. My dearest Eve, if you're reading this, I didn't get the time I hoped for. He wrote that he had bought back the place he swore he'd never step foot on again. He called Sweetwater Ridge that broken cradle, said he'd been going there on his business trips to fix what used to fix me. He told me about a laptop waiting on an old oak desk by a window that looked out over pasture. He wrote that the password was the date we met followed by my maiden name. He said he was sorry for the secrets. He said he built something for me. He signed it the way he only did when he needed me to believe him, Joshua, not Josh. I folded the letter tight and pressed it to my chest like a hymn book. I'm Evelyn May Carter, 50 years old last June, and I've been a lot of things in my life, teacher, choir alto, the woman who always brings peach cobbler to repast, but no title ever felt the way Grandma does when KJ runs at me like a little comet. I live 3 blocks from St. Mark's Missionary Baptist in a brick ranch with a porch that stays swept and a rose bush that blooms like it loves me back. Sundays smell like collards and cornbread in my kitchen. Every 3rd Thursday the women from church come over to quilt while Deacon B sits on the steps and hollers about his dominoes. Joshua and I were quiet people with loud laughter. He'd grown up out near the Texas line, one of 4 boys and the only one who ever said please to a horse. He worked maintenance at the county hospital, the man they called when a machine forgot itself. My classroom had his fingerprints all over it. Shelves he put up for my paperbacks, stools he fixed for my kids who never sat still. There were things he didn't talk about, his father, the land, those brothers. When the past came knocking, he'd change the subject and kiss my forehead. Eve, some doors are meant to stay shut. I promised him once, maybe in our 3rd year, maybe later when we were tired and money was tight, that I wouldn't go looking. I kept my promise. Until I couldn't. Until a brass key and the absence he left asked me to. Grandma, why you got a suitcase? KJ asked that evening, leaning in the doorway with his book bag still on, eyes wide and curious like always. I'm going to go see something your pop-pop wanted me to see, I told him, tying a scarf around my curls. I'll be back soon. Is it a surprise? He whispered, conspiratorial. Yes, baby, I said. A big one. You say a prayer for me. He did, right there by my knees, 8 years old and earnest, hands clasped like instructions he'd learned from his mama and me. Dear Lord, let Grandma see what she needs to see and not get lost. Then he opened one eye. And let the car make it up the hills. Amen. I laughed, even as something in my chest squeezed with the sweetness and the fear. 2 days later I was up before the sun, driving west on I-20, coffee sloshing in the cup holder and my notebook on the passenger seat. I'd started a habit since the funeral. Every time something didn't sit right in my spirit, I wrote it down. I titled the front page My Notebook of Suspicions, like it was a detective novel. In it went the little things. Joshua's sudden interest in flight prices last year, the way he'd started making photo albums like he was racing time, bank statements where the mortgage got paid down real fast, a stack of gas receipts that weren't Mississippi gas. The last line I wrote before the Texas state line was, "Why would a man spend money he never had on land he never wanted me to touch?" Pine County didn't look like it wanted to be found. The road turned into a 2-lane that turned into something narrower that turned into gravel. A line of pines stood shoulder to shoulder like choir sopranos who don't forget. The gate found me with its name cut into iron Sweetwater Ridge. Letters curved like a lasso. The key slid into the lock as if we were being introduced and the chain fell away. I eased my old car up the long drive, breath fogging in the cool air, knuckles white on the steering wheel. The house rose slow and sure. A wide porch, a roofline like a hat pulled down, big windows that caught everything. It was not the broken place I'd imagined. It was cared for, painted, loved. I stepped onto the porch and put my hand on the door. It opened like it had been waiting. I wasn't ready for the horses. Not living ones at first, paintings, photographs, sculptures, sketches. Everywhere I looked, there they were. A gray runner mid-stride, a mare nuzzling a foal, a black stallion standing like a king, his coat a storm at midnight. The great room was all beams and stone, but what took my breath was the handmade gospel of hooves and manes. Joshua had teased me about horses for years. How I could spend 2 hours reading about a breed I'd never ride. I'd always wanted a little land, a backyard big enough for dreams. He'd laughed and kissed my temple and said, "One day." On a desk by the window sat a silver laptop with a single red rose laid across it. Joshua's handwriting on a sticky note. For my Eve. Before I could touch the lid, tires crunched on gravel behind me. The sound reached in and flipped a switch I didn't know I had. I stepped to the window and watched an SUV turn and stop with a confidence that made my skin prickle. 3 men got out, tall, broad, moving like they were walking into a home they'd already decided belonged to them. Even from a distance I clocked the family resemblance to my husband in the set of their shoulders and the square of their jaws. Reuben, Alan, and Darius Price, the brothers I'd heard about only in the negative. I locked the door without meaning to. Knocking that started polite turned insistent. "Evelyn, it's Reuben," a voice called, country Texas from the back of the throat. "We should talk." They were not here to hug me. They weren't here to bring a casserole or say a kind word about their brother. The laptop waited like an answer. I opened it, typed the date we met and my maiden name, and prayed my memory hadn't left me. The welcome screen bled into a folder labeled for Evelyn. Inside dates. So many dates. The first one was the day after we buried him. I clicked. Joshua's face filled the screen. Not the dimmed, tired face from those last months, but my man as he'd been when he was happiest, sun across his cheekbones and that crooked grin I had chased when I was 22 at a church picnic with a broken sandal. "Hey Eve," he said. "If you made it this far, I'm both sorry and relieved. I asked too much of you. You promised me once you wouldn't go where I asked you not to. I'm releasing you from that." His voice softened. "I came back here because I wanted to turn the worst story I had into a gift for the love of my life. You. There are 6 horses in the stables. Breeds you've bragged on for years, and the best hay you can find this side of Amarillo. In the desk drawer are documents you're going to need. In another folder are videos for the next year because I am stubborn and couldn't stand the thought of leaving you without my voice." My throat closed around a sob. "I should have told you about my heart," he went on. "Hypertrophic cardiomyopathy. Inherited. The doctors gave me years and I didn't want those years to be a countdown you had to watch. I chose wrong and right at the same time. You can be mad. I'll take it." He swallowed. "What my brothers don't know is I bought Sweetwater back from Daddy himself. He needed cash and his pride wouldn't let him ask the Golden Boys. He sold it to me because I was the only one with a kind memory of this dirt." The knocking at the door turned to a heavy thud. I paused the video, ran my palm down my skirt and listened. There came the sound that changes the temperature of a room, a second engine, then doors, then a voice on a mic. "Sheriff's office." A woman's voice, firm, not unkind. "Mrs. Carter, we need to speak with you." My heart stuttered. I pulled the desk drawer, fingers finding a blue folder with my name on a tab. Joshua's order lived in there. The deed, notarized signatures, bank wires that explained the late nights and extra shifts, letters from 3 attorneys. He had known this moment would come. He built me a shield. I opened the door to Pine County in full mourning. The sheriff, brown-skinned and steady-eyed, hair coiled into a neat puff, stood flanked by my husband's brothers. Reuben's smile flickered like a porch light that hadn't worked right in years. "Mrs. Carter," the sheriff said, nodding. "I'm Sheriff Lila James. These gentlemen have a temporary order to inspect the property related to a pending estate question." "Good morning, Sheriff James." I held out the folder. "Before anyone steps foot past this threshold, I'd like you to read what my husband prepared." Ellen tried to wave it away. "Family matters don't need." "Ellen," Sheriff James said, not taking her eyes off me. "Hush." She read. The brothers watched the reading like a horse watches a new rider, ears forward, ready to buck. When she finished, she handed the folder back, her mouth a line of satisfaction. "Gentlemen," she said, turning to them, "this appears to be civil, not criminal. Mrs. Carter is within her rights. There will be no inspection today. You can follow up with the judge who issued your temporary." Reuben's face purpled like he'd swallowed a plum whole. "This is our land." "It was your land," I said, my voice a surprise to my own ears, calm, lower than usual, the voice I use when a student thinks a raised tone will get them their way. "Your brother bought it." "He left it to me." "Because he was confused," Darius snapped, the first words he'd said. He looked like the youngest, a man who lived in someone else's shadow so long he forgot the sun. "Because he knew what he was doing," I said, and the sheriff's eyes clicked back to me with the faintest nod like I'd passed a test. "They left scorched earth in their tire tracks." Sheriff James tipped her hat. "You call if they come back wrong," she said. "County folks know these boys. They don't stop easy." I closed the door and slid my back down it until I was sitting on the floor with the folder in my lap and the laptop light on my face. Grief and anger and a strange version of all took turns in me like cousins at a repast line. My husband had been sick. My husband had been brave. My husband had built me a secret. Morning came soft and blue. Sweet tea tasted different on a porch like that, with mist lifting and the hum of something ancient in the trees. I walked toward the stables with my hands jammed in Joshua's old work jacket and my breath clouding like whispers. "Mrs. Carter?" The voice was all weather and kindness. A man in his early 60s stepped out of the tack room wiping his hands on a rag. He had the kind of posture a life around animals teaches. Ready to lean, ready to move, never in a hurry until he has to be. "I'm Ellis," he said. "Your husband hired me to manage the horses." For a second I could only nod. "I'm Evelyn," I answered. "I suspect you already knew that. Mr. Joshua talked about you like a man talks about being saved," he said, eyes crinkling. "Said you kept his red right." He walked me down the stalls, naming them like people at a family reunion. "That gray Andalusian is Glory. That Appaloosa's name is Biscuit because she'll eat one out your pocket if you let her. 2-quarter horses, Deacon and Ruby. Thoroughbred named Sunday. And that black Frisian there," he said, nodding toward a creature so beautiful my knees forgot I'd asked them to hold me. "That's Midnight. Your husband spent half a year chasing that horse down because you liked a painting of a black stallion in a storm." I reached a hand out. Midnight regarded me with an intelligence I've never seen in some grown men. He pushed his velvety nose into my palm and exhaled. I laughed out loud, one sharp, astonished sound that bounced off wood and back into me like a blessing. "Did Joshua ever tell you?" I had to stop and start again. "Did he talk about his health?" Ellis wiped his hands slower. "Not straight on. But a man looks at the calendar different when something's chasing him. He worked like he was trying to outrun a shadow. Added things he didn't have to add. Made room where there wasn't. You know." "I did." "And the brothers?" I asked, feeling my voice get tight again. "They sniffed around when folks started striking oil up here." He tugged a stall door to make sure it latched. "Men who don't visit when you're mending fences will somehow find your address when there's a check to be cashed." We stood a long moment in the warm breath and the sound of hooves and the old music of hay settling. "There's something else," Ellis said finally. Something your husband told me to keep quiet unless things turned hot. He tilted his head toward the back pasture, toward an old barn that hadn't been given the facelift the others had. We should walk. He led and I followed, boots I didn't deserve in my feet, jacket heavy where it smelled like Joshua and cedar oil. The old barn sat like a witness. Inside was dust and time. Ellis moved hay bales like he'd rehearsed it in his sleep and lifted a trapdoor I would have sworn was the floor itself. He called it insurance, he said, flipping a switch as we descended. Light bloomed in a concrete tunnel cool as a cellar. 50 yards later the tunnel opened into a room that took my breath again. Not with beauty but with design. Filing cabinets. A sturdy desk. A wall of maps. A cot I prayed he didn't have to use alone. Welcome to Mr. Joshua's war room, Ellis said softly. I walked the walls as if the paper might speak. Survey maps of Sweetwater Ridge and the surrounding properties with red grease pencil lines marking depths and angles. Notes in Joshua's hand so detailed I could hear the way he'd say them. Formation not where they think. Western acres, scrub cedar breaks, hard to access but worth it. He'd hired independent geologists, 3 of them by the signatures. He'd made them sign non-disclosures. He'd circled a section of the Western Ridge and written, "Looks worthless. Isn't." In a drawer wrapped in a rubber band were printed emails, bank ledgers with little yellow flags stuck in them, sworn statements from men whose names I didn't know, statements about Allen's consulting, that looked a lot like stealing, about Darius moving client money where it didn't belong, about Reuben telling tall tales to make numbers behave. It wasn't spite. It was protection. Not revenge. Leverage. I sank into the chair at the desk and put my head in my hands, the cool of the metal under my palm, the sound of Ellis breathing steady as midnight prayer. He started this after the first time they came sniffing, Ellis said. They didn't recognize him at first. He had a beard then. Watched them from the trees and decided secrets were weapons until he could get you safe. I opened my notebook and wrote, "My husband loved me enough to become a strategist." Then I underlined it. On the desk sat a picture I'd never seen, Joshua at 17 beside a chestnut mare. His smile, the unguarded kind I only got a handful of times when we were alone and something had gone right we didn't think could. He'd labeled the back in blue ink. Phoenix. Mama made me stop riding. Daddy sold her when I left. He said that horse was the only thing soft in a hard house, Ellis murmured. He said one of his brothers sold her out from under him for spite. I swallowed around a new kind of anger. The past is a patient thief. Back in the house, I watched the next Jesse Joshua video in the privacy of the little den he'd painted the color of sweet tea. They'll try to divide and conquer, he said. Reuben will come in acting like daddy. Allen will talk you to sleep with legal words. Darius is the one you think you could trust and you can't. They will use our Janelle if they can. I paused. Janelle is my only child. Smart mouth, big heart. Always wanted to be further than home but always found her way back on holidays. Her boy is KJ. Her grief was loud at the funeral, then quiet as glass. The phone vibrated on the table. Her name flashed. Baby. Hey mama. Janelle's voice came ragged, like she'd been crying or yelling or both. I just got a call. From some men who said they're daddy's brothers. My spine went ice. What did they say? They said they wanted to make things right. Said you showed up to steal their family land and you don't understand the history. They said. I could hear her breathing. They offered me a settlement, Mom. Said if I helped bring the estate back to fairness, I could get a third. They sent a document. Don't sign anything. My voice came out cleaner than my heart felt. Don't agree to anything. I'm in East Texas at the ranch your daddy bought back. There are things you need to see before you decide who's right. Why didn't Daddy tell us he was sick? She asked so softly I barely heard it. Because he was trying to save us and hurt us at the same time, I thought hateful truth. I'll show you, I said. I'll show you everything. Give me until tomorrow. I don't like being the last to know, she said, the child in her and the grown woman fighting under her ribs. I know, I whispered. I'm sorry. Come in the morning. A long beat. I'll be there by 10. When the line went dead, I stood at the window and watched the light drain out of the hollows of the land, the way evening in the country folds itself neatly around you until you remember all the things you ever were. Teacher, sister in the choir, wife, mother, grandma, now unexpected landowner and general of a war I didn't sign up to fight but wouldn't run from. I slept in the room that must have been Joshua's as a boy, plank walls, a window wide enough to see whole weather systems coming, the kind of bed that gives you the truth about your back. Sometime before dawn I woke to the sound of coyotes calling each other like teenage boys from a parking lot, and felt a smile pull at me in the dark. I'm not brave by nature. I am thorough. In the morning I made coffee strong enough to embarrass my mother, cooked eggs, laid out biscuits because food steadies people in ways speeches can't. Then I walked the house again looking for a promised thing. He'd said there was a room for me alone. I found the key in the antique silver drawer of the nightstand in the master, and followed the hallway to a door that looked like nothing special. The lock turned with a satisfying click. I pushed it open and saw myself the way a person sees the child they used to be, suddenly, clearly, without mercy. The studio spilled light like a blessing. North windows. Sturdy easels. Brushes lined like a choir. Tubes of paint, brand names I whispered because I never afforded them when I wanted them. Stacks of canvas. Books on horses and skies and women who learned to tell the truth with color when nobody asked them to. In a low cabinet under a window seat I found a flat archival box. Inside were pieces of my youth I didn't know still breathed. My paintings from college, a self-portrait I'd done senior year of a girl who thought she was braver than she knew how to be. Tucked in the corner lay a note in Joshua's hand. She's still in there, Eve. Don't you dare leave her. I had to sit down right there on the floor because a woman can only carry so much even when she's practiced at it. Footsteps on the porch. A car door shutting. Another. Voices. Laughter that didn't belong to the hour or the house. I stood slow. Through the studio window I watched two vehicles roll to a stop in front of the porch, the familiar black SUV and behind it, a white sedan I knew like I knew my mama's potato salad bowl. Janelle stepped out, tall in her boots, hair up like her patience, eyes already searching. She smiled at the men climbing out of the SUV as if she knew them. She doesn't, I thought, something old and mean curling in my gut, a mother's fear dressed in grief's clothing. She texted as she walked, thumbs fast. Here with Uncle Reuben and them. Coming in. We need to talk. Jay. Uncle. I repeated out loud to an empty, beautiful studio. I locked the door behind me, slipped the key in my pocket, and let my face remember everything it ever knew about keeping steady in chaos. When Janelle turned the handle and called, Mama! I was standing in the entryway with the light behind me and breakfast waiting like I had meant to feed enemies. Mama, why didn't you tell me? She asked before a hello. Because I was catching my breath, I said. And because your daddy asked me to wait. Reuben stepped forward like a pastor who thought authority lived in his suit. Evelyn, he started, but I cut a glance sideways that had stopped men bigger than him. If you will let me have my child in peace, I said, we'll get to your business after. This is everyone's business, Alan said, flipping open a leather portfolio like a magician showing his empty hat. The estate involves coffee. I asked Janelle, eyes never leaving her face. She looked from me to them, the tilt of her chin familiar from arguments about curfews when she was 16. I'm listening to both sides, she said, which is a thing my daughter says when she thinks balance is the same as fairness. Then you'll hear this first, I said and picked up the laptop. Janelle, your daddy talks to you in here. She blinked. He made videos? Yes, I said. For a year. Reuben's face did something ugly quick. We don't need to. You don't, I said. But she does. We sat. Janelle perched on the edge of a chair like readiness taught itself to her bones. The brothers spread out across my house like they had plans for the square footage. I opened a video labeled for Janelle. When she needs it. Joshua's face filled the screen and took the air out of all of us. Hey baby girl, he said. If you're watching this, your mama did right by you and let you see the truth herself. I should have told you about my heart. I was selfish wanting to pretend. I'm sorry. You ask good questions and you deserve to ask them to my face. Janelle's breath hitched. There's something else, he continued, voice tightening just slightly. Your uncles have a talent for shaping stories. They took my share of Daddy's estate when I was 19 because I was at school and they were here with the paperwork and a pen and no shame. When I said I'd tell, they threatened to put their wrong on my back. I left. I changed my address and the story of my name, and I built a life with your mama that had no room for their poison. Whatever kindness they show you, understand it's a strategy, not a sudden salvation. The room went so quiet I could hear the swallow each of them tried to hide. I paused the video and looked at my daughter. Do you need a minute? Janelle wiped a tear quick, like she didn't want anyone to see it. Keep going, she said, voice thin with anger and love braided tight. Reuben stood as if he meant to reach for the laptop. This is slander, he snapped. Boys do stupid things. That was a long time ago. And you're still doing them, I said, setting my coffee down soft. You came in here offering a third to me, a third to my child, and a third for y'all to split from a land you already knew you didn't price right because you left out the West Ridge on purpose. Alan's mouth clicked open. He hadn't seen my husband's maps. Y'all thought I was a schoolteacher from Jackson with soft hands and a soft head. I continued, my voice dropping. You were wrong about at least one of those. I didn't say which. Reuben's smile returned like a mask that cost too much. We can talk about the West Ridge later. No, I said. We'll talk about it when my lawyer gets here, and when the men from Western Plains Energy are inside the same room as the men you brought from Northern Extraction, so everybody hears the same numbers at the same time. Darius looked at me with something almost like curiosity. Who told you to set it up like that? My husband, I said, and I thought I might break right there from the pride and the grief of being loved that thoroughly. The brothers left with the politeness of snakes. Janelle stayed seated until the door shut and then stood so fast the chair scooted back and hit the wall. I believed them, she said in a whisper that wasn't a whisper. For a minute, Mama, I believed them because they had pictures of Daddy when he was little and stories I didn't know. And they called me niece like it meant a Christmas we'd never had. It's all right to want family, I said, walking around the table to her the way you walk toward a skittish horse, steady and talking. It's not all right to let wanting turn you blind. Tears slid down, hot tracks that made my own come run in solidarity. She pressed her hand to my chest, right over my heart. What do we do? I smiled, that old mean smile people always assume churchwomen didn't have. We do what I'm good at. We plan. That night the house felt both too big and exactly big enough. I walked it once more with the kind of attention grief gives you when it runs out of crying. Slow, deliberate, noticing. The tile Joshua chose for the kitchen floor wasn't just pretty. It had grip a tired woman with socks could trust. The windows were double-paned against Texas heat. The porch fans were the good kind, whisper quiet and blessed with stamina. I could see my husband in every choice as if each decision left a fingerprint. I opened my notebook again, wrote down names, dates, the sheriff's card, the lawyer's number, the companies the brothers wanted in the room and the one I wanted. Then I flipped to a clean page and wrote non-negotiables. The way I tell my students to write thesis statements like they mean it. Under that I wrote, don't let them put Janelle in the middle. Don't sign anything without prayer. Don't show mercy to a lie. My phone buzzed. A new text, unknown number. Miss Carter, this is Sheriff James. Camera alerts showed the prices come back down the road after dark and sit near your west fence line for 10 minutes. They didn't enter. Do you want extra patrol? I stared out into the night through the window over the sink. The dark out there is not city dark. It's a living thing with parts you can hear and parts you imagine. Yes, please, I typed. Then I added, thank you for believing me when I said no earlier. Her reply came back with a little smile in it, even over text. Men who say family matter at your door but bring papers with them are rarely family, Miss Carter. Get some sleep. We'll watch. I left the kitchen light on. I wanted the house to look occupied by something larger than me. The next morning dawned melancholy and shy. The driveway filled right on time. Northern Extraction's man strutted like a quarterback at homecoming. Western Plains team rolled up with quiet eyes and ready pens. My lawyer shook my hand with the respectful pressure of a man who'd been asked to win hard things. The prices paraded in behind them, smelling like victory and expensive cologne. I had biscuits and coffee on a sideboard in the dining room because while I am willing to fight, I am determined to remain myself. Mrs. Carter, the northern man said, his smile too white. Harrison Wells. Pleasure. Mr. Wells, I said, shaking his hand with my palm dry and my eyes friendly but tired. You go by Harrison or Mr. Wells? Harrison, he said, not used to being asked. Then welcome, Harrison. This is Thomas Reeves from Western Plains. I went on, nodding to the other man. My attorney, Mr. Blanchard. You'll meet in just a moment. Reuben Allen Darius, you know where the table is. Reuben spread his arms as if to bless the wood. Let's divide this up fair, he said as soon as everyone sat. That's a beautiful word, I answered. Fair. We should put some bones on it. I clicked a remote and a screen lowered at the end of the room. Joshua had made sure the house could do theater. A map of Sweetwater Ridge appeared. Someone made a noise they didn't mean to make. This is all 2,200 acres, I said, the teacher in me sliding back into my shoulder blades and down my spine, letting me stand easier, talk cleaner. Note here that the west ridge you left off your simple proposal looks like scrub with a slope. Note also, click, that the independent geological surveys my husband commissioned say there is a deep unusual formation under that scrub and that slope. Harrison leaned forward. Thomas set his jaw, impressed or pretending. Alan's hand tightened on his pen. Reuben's eyes narrowed into the kind of meanness that behaves in public. We can dispute the surveys, Harrison began. Of course you can, I said, smiling the way my Aunt Loretta taught me when a man tried to talk me past a decision I'd already made. That's why they've been verified by not one, not two, but 3 independent teams. Mr. Reeves. Western Plains man cleared his throat. We've seen enough to take this very seriously, Miss Carter. And you, I said, turning to my husband's brothers, will not be dividing anything. You will be leaving with an agreement you are going to sign, and a promise you are going to keep. Reuben laughed then. A sound that would have rattled a newcomer. And if we don't? I lifted a stack of sealed envelopes and passed them to my lawyer, who passed them around the table. Then we open those, I said. And while I'm not a vindictive woman, I am a prepared one. Alan cracked his open and blanched. Darius's eye ticked. Reuben did not touch his, which told me everything I needed. What is this? Harrison asked, looking down at copies of documents he hadn't expected to see. Statements and emails and a sloppily hidden trail that traveled from Pine County to Houston and back. History, I said. Some of it past the reach of courts. None of it past the reach of reputation. Silence settled heavy and thick. I looked at Janelle across the table, my girl, her hands flat on the wood, her eyes on me. She nodded once. I nodded back. That's when my phone vibrated hard in my pocket, humming like a bee trapped in a jar. Sheriff James's name lit up. I excused myself from the table, stepped into the hallway, and answered. Sheriff. Miss Carter, sorry to disturb you in the lion's den, she said, voice quick and all business. We just picked up a call from a judge's clerk. Someone's trying to rush a new order through X-Part using altered documents. The runner is on his way to your place right now. From who? There was a pause. From Alan Price's office, ma'am. I turned my head and looked at the dining room where Alan sat pretending not to sweat. And Miss Carter, the sheriff added, the runner isn't headed to your front drive. He just turned onto the farm road that runs behind your west fence line. The house seemed to tilt on its axis. I looked at the closed envelopes at the table, the men who thought they'd walked into an easy morning, the map still lit on the wall, the horse paintings watching like witnesses. Sheriff, I said, voice steady and low as a storm front. I suggest you meet him at the fence. I'll take care of what's inside. I hung up and walked back into the room with that feeling I get some Sundays when the choir is too good. Heat behind my eyes and air in my lungs I didn't know was missing. Everything all right? Reuben asked, feigning concern like a rented suit. More than all right, I said, taking my seat and laying both hands flat on the table like I was blessing it. Gentlemen, it seems somebody just tried to change the rules while we were playing. Alan's face did a quick math problem and failed. Darius went still. Janelle sat up straighter, hand inching toward her phone as if the truth might need calling like a cab. Outside, faint, there was the low whine of tires on gravel coming from the west. The wall clock ticked loud as an accusation. Now, I said, looking from one brother to the next, landing last on Reuben, shall we return to the question of fair? Or shall we find out together what happens when a woman who has buried a good man and kept his house and raised his child and loved his God has had her fill? The front doorbell rang and the sound ran down the hallway like a warning. Ellis, I called, my voice the kind that makes a person move. Would you be so kind? I slid my notebook just inside my purse, fingers brushing the smooth edge of a smaller envelope I hadn't opened yet, the one Joshua labeled only if absolutely necessary. My thumb found the crease. The doorbell rang again, impatient, insistent. I looked at my daughter. I thought of my grandson's prayer. Let Grandma see what she needs to see and not get lost. I won't, I whispered, mostly to God and partly to the woman I used to be, and stood to face whatever came through my door next. The man at the door wore a suit too sharp for gravel roads and shoes that had never known mud. He introduced himself as Mr. Colton, runner for the Pine County Court Clerk's office, voice slick as butter left in July sun. Sheriff James wasn't 5 steps behind him. Her cruiser pulled up in the drive like backup she didn't plan to explain. "Ma'am," Colton said, holding out a manila envelope like it was gospel. "Temporary order from Judge Hemsworth, filed this morning. Concerns this property." "Funny," Sheriff James said, her hand already reaching for the document. "Judge Hemsworth's clerk called me 20 minutes ago to say no such order was finalized. Why don't you and I read this together?" Colton's jaw twitched. He let go too quickly. She flipped the envelope open, skimmed, then whistled through her teeth. Copy and paste signatures. Altered date stamps. Sloppy work, son. Reuben came storming into the entryway. "This is harassment." "Sit down, Mr. Price," Sheriff James snapped, all patience gone, "before I charge you with obstruction in your brother's house." I felt my shoulders loosen for the first time that morning. Somebody else saw it, saw them. Back in the dining room, the tension had shifted. Alan's face had gone from smug to gray. Darius avoided my eyes altogether. Harrison Wells from Northern Extraction cleared his throat. "Miss Carter, I don't know what family matters y'all have, but from a business standpoint this is not your concern." I cut in, calm but sharp. "My husband built this house for me. His work, his papers, his voice, they all sit in this room. Any company that tries to deal around me deals with lies. You hear?" Thomas Reeves from Western Plains nodded slow, respect in his eyes. Harrison looked like he'd swallowed vinegar. Sheriff James lingered in the doorway, arms crossed. "Gentlemen, you may want to tread careful. County's eyes are on this place now." I watched Reuben's nostrils flare. He wasn't used to losing. That night, after the companies left and the brothers slunk back to their hotel, I sat with Janelle at the kitchen table. The house was too quiet without Joshua's laugh rolling through it. I opened my notebook, turned to a fresh page, and slid it between us. "Write what you remember," I told her. "Every call, every word, every promise they made. If it lives on paper, it can't slip away in the dark." She stared at the blank page, then picked up the pen. "They said Daddy was confused," she whispered. "They said you pressured him." Her hand trembled, but she wrote it down. "They said if I sided with them, they'd pay off my student loans." My breath caught. "You didn't believe them, did you?" "I wanted to," she said, eyes wet but steady, "because it sounded easier than this. But then I saw his face on that screen." I reached across and took her hand. "Baby, truth is heavier than lies, but it holds better. You remember that." The next morning, Ellis waved me down by the barn. "Mrs. Carter, you best come see." We walked to the West Ridge. Tire tracks dug deep into the damp earth. Fresh, no more than a few hours old. Ellis crouched, pressed 2 fingers into the grooves. Truck with weight on it. Maybe hauling equipment. I scanned the tree line. Pines shifted, whispering secrets I couldn't hear. "They're trying to find the spot," I said, remembering the circled area on Joshua's map. "Won't be long before they bring men who don't care whose name is on the deed." Ellis straightened, dusted his hands. "You got friends in town?" "Some," I said. "Pastor Lewis. Miss Geraldine at the diner. Folks who know right from wrong." "Call them," Ellis said. "This fight's not just about land. It's about who Pine County listens to." That Sunday I drove into town for service at the little Baptist church Joshua once swore he'd never walk back into. The wooden pews creaked with history, hymns rose to the rafters, and when Pastor Lewis spotted me, his face softened like he was seeing an old wound finally tended. After service he pulled me aside. "Evelyn May Carter, I heard whispers your husband came back to Sweetwater Ridge before he passed." "He did," I said, swallowing. "And now his brothers are trying to take it." He shook his head. "Those boys never did learn how to leave poison behind. You're not alone, you hear? Folks here remember Joshua's kindness before he left. They'll stand with you. Pastor, I whispered. I might need that stand sooner than later. He clasped my hand, his grip strong as oak roots. Then you'll have it. Back at the ranch, Janelle paced the porch with her phone pressed to her ear. Mama, it's them again, she hissed when she saw me. They said they've got proof Daddy was never right in the head when he bought this place. Said they can drag us into court for years. I took the phone, pressed it to my ear. Reuben, I said, because I knew it was him. You're wasting your breath. The papers are clean. The deed is mine. And if you want to test me in court, be ready for every stone in your glass house to break. Silence. Then a low chuckle. Evelyn, you don't know what you're up against. I hung up before he could finish. That night, I unlocked the little envelope Joshua had labeled only if absolutely necessary. Inside was a single flash drive and a note. If they push you to the wall, plug this in. Trust me. My hand shook as I set it down. I wasn't ready to know what it held, but I knew I'd need it soon. A week later, the courthouse hearing was set. Temporary injunction. The brothers wanted control until the matter of mental competency was settled. They claimed Joshua wasn't of sound mind when he signed the deed. I dressed in my best Navy suit, pearls from my mama at my throat, Bible in my bag. Janelle walked beside me, strong and tall, but her hand slipped into mine when we climbed the courthouse steps. Sheriff James met us at the door, nodding. I'll be inside. Don't let them rattle you. Inside, the Prices sat smug in their row, lawyers flanking them like armor. I pulled out my notebook, laid it flat on the table in front of me. Evidence. Truth. Love. The judge called the case. Their attorney started in with words like confused, weak heart. Notified no one. My anger simmered, but I held my tongue. When it was my turn, I stood. My voice didn't shake. Your Honor, my husband was a man of sound mind, clear spirit, and deep planning. He built Sweetwater Ridge back from ruin. He left records, witnesses, and his own voice to prove it. I glanced at Janelle, then at the laptop in my bag. If permitted, I'd like the court to hear from him directly. Gasps rippled through the room. Reuben shot up, shouting, Objection! But the judge leaned forward. Proceed, Mrs. Carter. I plugged in the flash drive. The screen flickered and Joshua's face appeared once more. Steady and alive in a way that broke me open all over again. Before I continue, if my story touches your heart, please subscribe so more voices like mine can be heard. The courtroom stilled. His recorded words cut through every lie like a gospel truth no one could deny. Joshua looked straight into the camera the way a man does when he's already told the truth to himself. The courtroom felt small all of a sudden. Pine-paneled walls, flag in the corner. Folks squeezed into pews that remembered everyone who'd ever sat through a hard morning. My fingers found the edge of my notebook. Janelle's hand found my arm. Good morning, Your Honor, Joshua said, voice steady, recorded a year ago and somehow right on time. If you're watching this, it means my wife is defending what I left her. I am of sound mind and body in this recording. I purchased Sweetwater Ridge from my father with clean funds. I oversaw every renovation. I conducted 3 independent geological surveys, and I saved every paper in a place my wife can find. If anyone suggests confusion, it's because my brothers prefer fog to daylight. A low wave of reaction moved across the room, like wine through a field ready to harvest. Reuben stood again, face hot. This is manipulation. Sit down, Mr. Price, the judge said, barely glancing at him. Mrs. Carter, continue. Joshua kept talking. I'm not a perfect man. I am a careful one. I left videos for my wife because I know grief steals time and memory. I didn't want her to carry my burdens alone. If you doubt my capacity, ask the men who installed the beams I approved, the bank clerks who notarized my signatures, the foreman who took my calls at 2 in the morning because I couldn't sleep if a measurement felt wrong. He smiled then, the quick, crooked one that always found the softest place in me. Ask Ellis. He'll tell you I'm stubborn as a mule and twice as patient. I watched the judge watch my husband. In his face, a softening. In my chest, a breaking that wasn't breaking anymore. It was release. Mrs. Carter, the judge said when the video paused, do you have supporting documents? Yes, Your Honor. I lifted the blue folder Joshua had labeled for court. Affidavits, survey confirmations, dates and signatures. I handed them to the clerk. Harrison Wells from Northern Extraction leaned the slightest bit forward to see. Thomas Reeves sat back, satisfied like a man who'd bet right. Ellen tried to recover. Your Honor, even if the court accepts the authenticity of that recording, we still maintain that Joshua's secrecy shows instability. He hid the purchase. He hid his illness. He hid. Men hide things to avoid noise, Joshua's voice said from the screen, as if the Lord himself had punctuated the moment. I hadn't touched a key. The clip kept playing because I had cued it that way the night before in my kitchen with tears on my sweater. Sometimes they hide to protect. Sometimes they hide because shame taught them how. I hid my illness because I couldn't bear to turn our dinner table into a countdown. That was wrong. But don't you dare confuse my pride with incompetence. A chuckle ran through the gallery. Pastor Lewis's head bowed, shoulders shaking. I knew that shoulder shake. It was the laughter you do when God winks. Before I continue, if my story touches your heart, please subscribe so more voices like mine can be heard. I cut the clip right there because timing matters. The words hung in the air like a bell. The judge cleared his throat. Mr. Price, any real evidence about incompetence beyond your feelings? Alan shuffled papers. Darius stared at his hands like they'd betrayed him. Reuben tried one more angle. We are family, Your Honor. Land like this doesn't belong to outsiders. I stood, half turning so the whole room could see my face. I married Joshua in a church with 3 ushers and 5 aunties and a choir that sang like they broke the ceiling. I took care of him when the county hospital sent him home with nights too long. I cooked his favorite skillet cornbread when nothing tasted right. If you think that makes me an outsider to his life or to what he built, you don't know a thing about family. The judge set the papers down and sighed in a way that told me he'd already made up his mind. Temporary injunction denied. The deed stands. The court recognizes Mrs. Carter as legal owner of Sweetwater Ridge. Further petitions on competency will be considered only with new, credible evidence. I suggest y'all take this as a sign to pursue a settlement, or better yet, peace. Gavel. Wood on wood. A sound that felt like breath. Outside the courthouse the air smelled like hot dust and relief. Janelle put her head on my shoulder and let out a laugh that turned into a sob against the fabric of my suit. Miss Geraldine from the diner pressed a Tupperware into my hands like an offering, pimento cheese and crackers and 2 slices of pound cake, tucked in wax paper. For your ride back, baby, she said. A woman fights better fed. Sheriff James lingered by the steps, thumbs hooked in her duty belt, watchful. You won today, she murmured. That don't mean they're done. I know, I said. Bullies don't learn the first time. Pastor Lewis shook my hand like a deacon finalizing a deal. We got fish fry on Friday, he said. You bring that daughter and that boy. We'll put them on the prayer list and a plate. I smiled. Make mine with extra tartar sauce. Back at Sweetwater Ridge, I set the pound cake on the counter, poured sweet tea into mason jars, and breathed in the ordinary. Janelle leaned on the island, turning her glass in circles. Mama, what did you put on that flash drive? More videos. Some, I said. And some receipts. I tapped my notebook. Your pop-pop wasn't the only one who can be thorough. Late afternoon light fell across the floors Joshua had chosen, golden as syrup. For a moment I let myself stand there and just be in the house he made for me, before the next thing came knocking. And it did 3 hours later. A car eased up the drive. Not the brothers' SUV, not a sheriff's cruiser. A modest sedan. A woman stepped out, hair pulled back, eyes red-rimmed from too little sleep and too much hope. Behind her, a man in work boots. They hesitated at the bottom step until Ellis appeared in the doorway behind me, a quiet shadow. Can we help you? I asked. Mrs. Carter, the woman said, voice careful. My name is Nora Martinez. This is my brother, Isaiah. We were told to come by. Someone called last night. Said our birth father had other children here. Said he was gone. Said one of those children might need us. For a heartbeat the past and present overlapped so tightly I felt dizzy. I thought of the letter I hadn't given, the part of Joshua's story he didn't want to use unless we were pressed hard against a wall. He'd found other branches on the tree. He chose to leave them be unless truth could do more healing than harm. Come inside, I said, stepping back. We'll talk in the kitchen. We sat around the table with the good cloth still on it from last night's prayers. I poured tea, set out Miss Geraldine's crackers because hospitality and truth go down easier together. Nora's hand shook when she took the glass. I don't know what you've been told, I said, but I'll tell you what I know. Joshua's father, your father, kept secrets like a man keeps coins he doesn't spend. He had sons here who carried his name and a family elsewhere he kept in shadow. My husband found proof of that while he was researching his heart condition. He didn't reach out. He thought it wasn't his to break in on another family's life. I think he hoped one day the truth could be an open door, not a battering ram. Isaiah cleared his throat. We got a call from a hospital social worker who knows my wife. She said a man named Reuben Price was looking for blood relatives. He's sick. He needs something. I looked down at my hands. When Reuben couldn't batter the door with legal lies, he looked for pity's back entrance. And yet, this was not a door to slam easily. I can't tell you what to do, I said. I won't put my hand on your decision either way. Just know this. Those men will use any kindness to buy leverage. If you help, do it with eyes open and paper straight. If you don't, that's yours to choose too. Nora glanced at her brother, tears catching the light. We didn't come for them first, she whispered. We came to see you. To see the place, to see if Joshua was happy at the end. I felt my own tears rise, that tide I've learned to let wash without drowning me. He was happy here, I said steady. He built this for me because he wanted to turn something hard into something holy. Whatever your daddy did, Joshua didn't let it be the last word. We walked them to the porch as the sky went lavender. They promised to call after they decided about Reuben. When they drove away, Janelle slipped her hand into mine. Family can be a blessing and a bruise, she said. It can, I answered. Our job is to choose the blessing and bandage the bruise. Days turned into a rhythm of work and watching. Western Plains sent environmental folks in boots and ball caps who walked the land like it was a church, gentle, asking permission in their way. Thomas Reeves came himself more than once, no tie sleeves rolled. We're building this on your terms, Miss Carter. He told me under the shade of the West Ridge. Slow, careful, honest. You have my word. Words are cheap, I said, because I am my mother's child. He smiled. Then you'll have our contracts too. We structured the deal the way Joshua would have liked. No outright sale of mineral rights. A revenue share with a floor and a ceiling. Funds set aside for land restoration when the work is done. Scholarships for Pine County kids who want to study environmental science or trades. I made them put Janelle's name and KJ's in the trust language because I want my people's futures written down. I made them promise to hire locals. I insisted on noise limits for the horses and quiet hours for the studio because art needs silence and creatures need peace. While lawyers did their word weaving, life stitched itself around us. On Tuesdays, I took KJ to the little ball field in town. On Wednesdays, I brought a peach pie to Miss Geraldine because she wouldn't stop feeding me. On Thursdays, the church women came out to sit on my porch and gossip in the open where gossip loses its power and turns into care. We sang sometimes old gospel mid-tempo harmonies we didn't have to try for because they're in our bones. A night I painted. The studio filled with canvas and breath. Midnight stood in the paddock visible through the windows. Black as a starless sky and twice as lovely. I started with him, of course I did. Rendered every muscle and the storm silk of his mane with a devotion I usually saved for prayer. Then I moved to wider things. The land itself. The way dawn sits low in the holler before it decides to rise. The West Ridge with its secret wealth layered under scrub and stubborn cedar. On one big canvas, the largest Joshua had left, I began a piece that was more memory than landscape. 3 riders in the foreground, features soft enough to be anyone and bold enough to be us. Me, Joshua as I remember him at 30, and Janelle, our lines overlapping, the path ahead wide even where it turned. I hung that one in the great room when it finally told me it was finished. Ellis helped lift. Janelle stood back and covered her mouth with her hand the way she used to when she was little, and saw something she didn't have words for yet. It's him, she whispered. And you. And me. Legacy, I said. Not what we leave, but what keeps walking. I wish I could say the Prices took their loss like men who learned a lesson. They did not. A month of quiet, then a burst of noise. Anonymous letters spooking potential contractors, Drone footage of our fence line sent to a blog that didn't care about truth. Someone cut the chain on a back gate. Sheriff James caught them on camera and hauled 2 boys in for trespass. Paid cash by a man who didn't give a name, she said. We can guess the handwriting. I kept my head down and my neighbors close. Pastor Lewis organized a potluck under the pecans next to the church. Sometimes you beat the devil with a casserole, he said in the microphone, and the whole county brought their best dishes until the tables sagged and spirits lifted. 2 weeks later, another knock. Not the brothers. Nora and Isaiah again, standing on my porch with eyes swollen but resolute. We decided, Isaiah said. We got tested. We matched enough to help. He took a breath. We will. But it'll be on paper the right way. No strings. No promises about land or money. Just a human thing. My throat tightened. You don't owe them. We know, Nora said. We're not doing it for them. We're doing it because once we saw this place and once we heard about Joshua, we wanted to be the kind of people he would have wanted us to be. Mercy is a wild, unreasonable force. It is not excuse. It refuses to mirror cruelty. It is not a doormat. It's a doorstop. A wedge that keeps the door from slamming shut forever. I'll pray for your strength, I told them. And for your paperwork. Janelle squeezed my hand later. In the kitchen where the light always falls right around 4. You okay with that? I am, I said, surprised to realize it. Joshua would have been. Even after all they did? Especially after, I said. Grace isn't for the deserving. It's for the stuck. She nodded, chewing that thought like a fresh piece of truth. The settlement finally landed the way a hymn ends. Last chord, soft, sure. The brothers signed a binding agreement in our dining room with Sheriff James present and Pastor Lewis at the end of the table. Because some rooms need both law and gospel. They renounced all claims. We agreed not to release the documentation Joshua had gathered unless they broke the peace. Reuben's hand shook when he signed. Alan stared at the paper like it might bite. Darius kept his eyes on the window where midnight grazed, maybe imagining a version of himself that could have chosen differently long ago. Before they left, Reuben asked for a word alone. I considered telling him to take his words to the road. Instead, I nodded and stepped onto the porch with him, where the rain had just started, soft, new. My sister, he began, and the word didn't quite fit in his mouth. And the man with her, they said they'll help. The hospital called. Surgery's set. I folded my arms to keep from wringing my hands like I was my grandmother and needed something to do with grief. I'm glad, I said, and it was true in a complicated way. I hope you heal. He stared out over the pasture. Joshua always had more of this, he said, gesturing at the porch, the light, the quality of the air even. He kept things that mattered. He chose different, I said. You can too. He nodded once, a bow without words, then went down the steps without looking back. I let him go without calling his name, which was its own kind of mercy. Some ties aren't meant to be retied. Some are meant to be set down gently and left. Some are rolled into full throat. The oil work started slow, careful like we agreed. Western Plains put up sound barriers that looked like fences with manners. They drilled where the surveys said, and when the pressure eased in, they celebrated quiet and kept the ground clean as a Sunday suit. Folks in town got jobs that paid and didn't poison, and on Friday nights the diner buzzed bigger than it had in years. Miss Geraldine hired 2 high schoolers and put a tip jar on the counter labeled college and car repairs. It filled fast. One hot afternoon, I took KJ to the ridge before supper. We stood with our hats shading our faces, cicadas singing like 1,000 sewing machines, the horizon doing its wide Texas thing. He held my hand the way he did when he was smaller. Pop made this? He asked, sweeping his arm like he could gather the whole place. He did, I said, and he made it for us. He was sick, KJ said matter of fact, because children say the thing and then look at you to see if you can bear it. But he still did a lot. He did, I said again and felt the praise move through me like a song. He turned his face up to mine. Grandma, are we going to be okay forever now? Nobody should promise a child forever. I squatted so we were eye level. We're going to be okay enough, I said. And when we're not, we got people who love us and a God who doesn't get tired. He nodded like that checked out. Can I ride midnight on my birthday? We'll ask Ellis, I said. And if he says yes, we'll bake midnight a carrot cake. KJ laughed so hard he snorted. It was the sound of the future choosing joy. The painting for the great room, the big one, taught me how to breathe again. I'd been layering glazes for weeks, letting color dry between sessions like letting bread rise without peeking. The last night I worked on it, a storm stacked itself on the far side of the ridge. I opened the windows an inch to let in the smell of rain, set gospel low on my phone, and painted the final strokes on the riders' faces, just enough to suggest, never enough to trap. When I stepped back, I saw what I had made. Not just us, but anyone who had ever had to turn pain into path. Anyone who had ever loved someone who left too soon and found a way to keep loving them without turning into a statue. When we hung it the next day, the house felt complete in a way that settled my bones. Pastor Lewis came by and stood with his hands in his pockets, head cocked. "That's a sermon," he said. "And you didn't use a single word." "Some sermons don't need them," I said. He grinned. "Don't tell my deacons." We held a Sunday dinner a month later, the kind with too many chairs and just enough room. Janelle made macaroni that could make you cry if you were susceptible to dairy and emotion. I fried chicken in the cast iron that holds the memory of every family meal we've survived and celebrated. Ellis brought greens that tasted like somebody's mama taught him, which somebody did. Miss Geraldine arrived with banana pudding, Pastor Lewis with lemonade, Sheriff James with a store-bought pie and zero shame. The Western Plains crew came too, a few of them, hats in hand, good with boundaries and grateful to be invited. We ate on the porch while heat lightning talked to itself far off. Someone started humming Blessed Assurance, and the hum turned to a low, easy sing, and then folks added harmony because of course they did. KJ fell asleep with his head in Janelle's lap, sticky with pudding and peace. I stood in the doorway a long time looking at my people, at the horses ghosting the pasture, at the ridge holding both wealth and warning, at the painting through the window, the riders always moving forward. When the last dish was washed and the last car light disappeared down the drive, I stepped out onto the porch with my tea. The night wrapped me in that particular country quiet. Alive, layered, honest. I took my notebook with me even though I don't need it as much now. I flipped to the last page and wrote, "We are safe. We are held. We are ours." Inside, the laptop still held videos I hadn't watched yet, but I didn't press play. I didn't need his voice right then to remember him. He was in the floorboards, the fences, the way the door hangs just slightly left and catches if you don't lift it a little. His fix for a house that settled the way people do when they decide to stay. Sometimes I talked to him anyway. "You did good, baby," I said to the night. "We did good." The wind moved through the pines, a sound like a choir behind a door. I thought of the people who will sit where I sit, far from my porch, women and men who have been told they're outsiders to their own story, who have been asked to hand over what they know as theirs, who have been underestimated because their strength doesn't holler. If you're hearing me, know this. You don't have to raise your voice to lay your claim. Write it down. Gather your people. Call the sheriff when you must and the pastor when you can and the neighbor who knows how to hold a ladder. Keep your hands open enough to receive help and closed enough to hold what's yours. You can insist on justice and still choose mercy. You can end a legacy of meanness without ending your own kindness. You can put beauty in the same room as survival and let them be married. The last cicada wound down. Midnight stamped once like he was agreeing. Somewhere a truck took the bend on County Road 7 and didn't bother us. I lifted my tea in a little private toast to every piece of the puzzle that hurt before it fit. This was my story. Now tell me, what part touched your heart the most?